But let's keep moving and go on to how does it work? Now, this is the theory portion of the talk, so if you want to check your email or... but if you want to really understand how does it work, we actually have been trying to figure that out as well. And we're also going to talk about the implications. But let's look at the pathways of influence. What I would argue is that not all mentoring leads to what we call close relationships, but when it does, it leads to these kind of developmental processes, the social emotional development, the identity development, the cognitive development, all of the things, the learning, all of the things that we hold as important developmental milestones in a young person happens when you have that strong relationship. And that in turn leads to these great outcomes. And that's conditioned by a lot of things. Can the person form good relationships? Are they competent enough to say thank you and make the mentor feel valued in their work? How long did the relationship last? How old is the young person? And what is the context? Does the family support it? And then what I put up there, the mediator. What I would argue is that when mentoring works, it improves the other relationships in the young person's life. Okay? Think of it almost like psychotherapy. You don't go to a psychotherapist to make a new friend, right? You go to improve your relationships with your partner, with your sister, with your teacher, with whoever, your parents. And so that's how mentoring works as well. In one study, we found that mentoring led to better school outcomes, and it was mediated by improved parent relationship in young people. Okay? They had this mentoring relationship. It was a corrective experience, and that in turn led to some of these great developmental outcomes. Because they're with that parent so much more than with the mentor. But having the mentor kind of reinforce what the parent has been saying all along, but the young person can't hear, really helps. Okay? Same thing when we looked at substance use as an outcome. The quality of the parent relationship led to better outcomes, selecting higher quality peers, which in turn led to lower uses of substances. The most exciting was more recently, my graduate students and I said, well, what about if the relationship occurs in a school? And you can imagine in a workplace, does it improve those kinds of relationships? And indeed, a higher quality mentoring relationship led to higher quality teacher relationships. The implications of that are profound. Because what it's suggesting is that a mentor enters your life, they provide consistent positive regard, help you develop yourself, your identity, and that in turn makes you more open to the adults that are already in your life, your boss, your coworkers, your teacher, and others. And so you can think about the effects of mentoring paying forward for forever, in a sense, because now you're able to forge new relationships more effectively. This concludes the theory section of the talk. Now let's talk about the implications. So, of course, reward sustainability and strength over growth. And I don't probably need to tell a European audience this, but for Americans I do. And then promote evidence-based practice, include rigorous evaluation. It's not enough to say my program works. Rigorous evaluation is the only way we're going to improve the science of mentoring. And it is a science. The same way there's thousands of journals and people studying psychotherapeutic relationships, teacher-student relationships, we need to understand mentoring relationships with the same level of rigor. And the only way to do that is with experimental designs and quasi-experimental designs. And measured, slow replication dissemination. Don't disseminate until you know exactly how and under what conditions your program works. By the way, this is where I ended 2 years ago, but now we're getting into phase 2 and the new ideas. So how do you improve the practice of youth mentoring? Today we're going to talk about a new initiative here in Europe, the European Center for Evidence-Based Mentoring, which is going to be in close alliance with the US Center for Evidence-Based Mentoring, and in doing so is going to bring the science of mentoring much more quickly to the practice of mentoring across Europe and beyond. And I encourage you to visit that website. The URL is umbmentoring.org. You'll notice under it there's current projects. Under current projects, you can get peer-reviewed journal articles, anything you want. Anything I've said today, you can read about in more detail. There's also something called the elements of effective practice. How many of you have heard of the elements of effective practice? Oh, okay. Well, this is key. This is probably why it's worth you coming today. What a team of scholars, including Janice, who's up in the audience, and you can see at the table, and my doctoral student Stella Canchua, many others, we sat down and we looked at the literature on every step of mentoring. And we said, what is the best practice for this, for this, for this? We looked at over 700 peer-reviewed journal articles, and we distilled it into what we call the elements of effective practice. And here's where it is. You can just go to mentoring.org and you can download it. Sylvia asked me to bring it. It was too expensive and heavy to carry paper around. Just look at it online. It's easy to find. You just go to program resources on that website and you'll see it. But it's key because it gives you programs that meet the criteria based on evidence and safety. Those are the things that we cared about. Evidence and safety across all these different standards. So we have a standard for recruiting volunteer mentors, for screening them, for training them, for matching and initiating them, for supporting them, and for closure. And today Janice is going to, tomorrow, Janice, who's here, is going to give an entire workshop on the elements of effective practice, which I encourage you to attend. We also, based on the elements, have spent the last 7 or 8 years developing online training that you can get at mentoringcentral.net, and it is online training that adheres to the elements of effective practice. And it's very interactive and fun, and there's games and all sorts of stuff. We also have something called Equip, which is basically we will go to your program and tell you how you can upgrade to adhere to the elements of effective practice. Okay, and then I encourage all of you to subscribe to the Chronicle of Evidence-Based Mentoring, which I'm proud to announce we're going to have European editors joining the editorial board. I was recruiting some last night so that we get more of a European perspective on mentoring. We have profiles in mentoring, and we plan to profile every researcher who's attending this summit, and it's also a database. So if you go to the Chronicle and you type in, foster care or whatever, you can find all summaries of all the peer-reviewed journal articles on that topic, specific to mentoring. So we have over 6,000 subscribers, but if you haven't subscribed yet and you want a kind of easy, accessible overviews of the research on mentoring, that's where you can find it. We also have a podcast series called Mentoring You, and you can find that on the Chronicle. You can subscribe to that and listen to nerdy talks on your way to work. And there's also a short course series that we hold, and I put the picture up to entice you to come, but we're also going to be holding short courses all over Europe in the years to come. And what we do is we say, look, the field of mentoring is very narrow, but there's many people people in the field of learning science, people in the field of juvenile delinquency and incarcerated youth, whatever the topic, we can bring in experts and inform the practice of youth mentoring. So far we've held short courses on strengthening the links between formal and informal, on the elements, on youth in the foster care system, and on youth mentoring in the digital age. And all of the talks from all of those short courses are available online. Okay. And our new venture is we are trying to figure out how to take the field of mentoring to everyone and say, okay, if say you find yourself mentoring some person and you say, how do I mentor? We want that search to lead to evidence. So the idea is that the research goes into evidence-based practice, which then we distribute through these products. And then, this is a word I've learned since Monday, valorization. And the idea that we take the research and we put it into practice, okay? And we better align research and practice. Now, I'm going to shift a little bit because I want to make a case, and this is my new thinking, and by the way, I'm writing a book called Mentoring in the Age of Inequality for Harvard University Press. I'm about 3 chapters in, but anyway, this is going to be kind of what I focus on. And that is that maybe our target, at least in the US, has been too narrow. We have focused on programmatic mentoring, where we take a young person and we pair them in a relationship with someone else. in doing so, in some ways, we're sending the message that we're pulling the person out of their life and giving them a better one, right? Oh, that poor kid, they had this horrible history, they come from a horrible neighborhood, they've got terrible influences, let's pull them into our world. And that just, if you think about the theory of mentoring, that's not how it works. You need to kind of enter their world, enter their ecosystem. And the idea is that a young person is part of multiple systems. There's the microsystem of their family, but then there's their community, there's the time period in which they're living, there's many, many influences on their lives. And we've been too focused specifically on that individual and on forming one-on-one relationships. And the idea is, if you look up to the very far right of that picture, that we need to create mentor-rich settings. And we need to think about that as much further upstream than at the point where you're creating one-on-one mentoring matches. That the young person, if they lived in a world where caring adults were just a natural part of their social ecology, we wouldn't need to go so far down. Now, it doesn't mean that those one-on-one aren't necessary, but they're not sufficient, okay? So the reason I say that is, a couple of years ago, Mentor did a large study in the US where they surveyed over 1,000 young people, and they asked them, when you were growing up, between the ages of 8 and 18, did you have a mentor? Guess what percent said it was a formal, sort of one-on-one mentoring relationship that was formed through a program? What percent do you think? Like a big brothers, big sisters kind of relationship. Any guesses? 15, 3. It was only 4%. Only 4% of people who were reflecting on their childhood said that that relationship occurred through a program. Far greater had informal mentors. And if you combine those that had both formal and informal, it's 62% of people who had mentors, it was informal, okay? So maybe we've been kind of focusing on too narrow a focus, at least I have. And you could take that data and you could say, well, maybe we don't even need programs. Young people are perfectly adept at finding their own mentors, right? However, it's unequally distributed. It really is. And the data show it, okay? The rich get richer. The kids who are born into more privileged contexts have more informal mentors. And the kids who are born into socially excluded contexts have a really difficult time finding natural mentors. And that's where programs can come in. So as your social capital increases, as your disadvantage increases, your social capital decreases. And that's just a very simple way of showing it, but I can show it with numbers as well. I had to. The idea is that it's not enough to leave forming natural mentor relationships to chance. It's just not enough because the odds are stacked against the poor children in every country. So programs can tool themselves, and there's great examples, to try to spread the wealth of social capital. Okay, we spread capital through taxation. We can spread social capital through programs and through new, interesting strategies of youth mentoring. This is very quickly, I'm just going to show you this because I only have a few minutes, but basically, when I was growing up in the 70s, there wasn't that big a gap between how much my parents were spending on enrichment activities and poor kids. That gap has widened. It's widened in the US, but there's also been a concentration of wealth throughout the world and throughout Europe. And as that gap widens, where do young people find their mentors? They find them through sports, through pursuing their interests. And young people in the lowest income groups are not finding them as much. Same thing with the percent of youth involved in school-based extracurriculars. Poor children are not as involved in extracurricular sports. High poverty schools offer fewer team sports. And this was from that same study. They asked kids, affluent kids have a wider range of informal mentors. So if you look, I'm sorry, the colors aren't that great, but if you look at kids on the left, in the left columns, those are ones from the bottom socioeconomic quartile, and the right column is the top. And you see that rich kids have kind of a wider variety of natural mentors, right? And you see extended families about equal, but those extended families are not often the people who can connect you to new jobs and new opportunities and new ways of thinking. And so we need to give less advantaged youth exposure to more kinds of mentors. And then they asked the parents, do you know A? And it was all these different things. And of course, wealthier parents know more high social capital people. Okay? So if my son wants a summer internship, I can call my friend Janice and I can say, can he work as an intern? And those kinds of things don't happen for less educated parents. This is important because a huge poll that was done in the US of 60,000 recent college graduates, those who had my professors at my university cared about me as a person. I had at least one professor who excited me about learning. All of these things that have to do with mentors. I had a mentor who encouraged me to pursue my dream. They were twice as likely to graduate from high school, and 5 years later, they were twice as likely to say they were satisfied with their lives. And we can't leave to chance that young people, those who grew up with these caring adults and their parents connecting them, they are happy to talk to their professors. Those who never have had that approach have no sense of entitlement, no sense of how to do that. And so we have to think about a continuum of care, that everyone needs these informal mentoring. I should be saying non-formal, but anyway, everyone needs caring adults that they meet spontaneously. Some people may need much more than a mentor. Some people may need a program. But new mentoring models try to bring together the ones that happen spontaneously and the programs. And how do we do this? Well, we have something called youth-initiated mentoring. Can I go a few minutes over? Okay, because I see I have 15 seconds, but I promise to finish up. We have youth-initiating models where young people are taught how to recruit a mentor. Rather than being given a fish, they're taught how to fish, okay? And we have some data from a 5-year random assignment study to show that it's effective. We have network engaged, and that's the idea that even if you form a relationship through something like mentor program, Friesland, the mentor's job is to constantly be trying to connect that young person with other adults. Yes, you're a great mentor, but pay attention. Maybe they also like their teacher. Maybe there's a particular coach or a particular boss or somebody, and let's talk about how you might approach them, because this relationship isn't going to last forever. Intentional mentoring, and that's the idea that whether it's an after-school program or a work site or anywhere where there's young people and adults, those adults could be mentors, but they need to be mindful of the fact that they're potential mentors, and we can train them in best practice. There's connected scholars, which I'm going to talk about briefly, and that's the idea that when a young person goes off to university, to college, and they've come from a disadvantaged background and they don't have the toolkit for recruiting professors and academic staff and graduate students to be their mentors, we can train them to do that. And we're doing that now. Distributed, and this is in the age of social networking, that we can find mentors everywhere. Young people can. And we can't think of it just in terms of face-to-face, that there's ways to connect through things like fan fiction and all these other new ways of connecting adults and youth. And we need to think about ways to instantiate best practice in those settings. So youth-initiated mentoring, it teaches a young person how to identify and reach out to a caring adult. And Levi is here. Are you here, Levi? Yes, and if you want to talk about a successful Dutch program that is using, it's called JIM, it's using youth-initiated mentoring right here, beautifully. Talk to Levi at the break. It provides structure and support to those relationships. So the young person says, you know what, there was this karate instructor I had growing up who I really connected with. The program then helps them reach out to that person and then provides that person with training and best practice. It takes away the expense of having to pay for to recruit mentors. It also takes away the long wait lists, and it addresses that shortage. And just quickly, some data. We talk about what kinds of outcomes. These are pretty hardcore outcomes with youth-initiated mentoring. I want you to look at the third column. Those young people who still had their youth-initiated mentor at 3 years out had better outcomes on all of these things we care about, okay? But I think it's also important to look at this first column, no outcomes, and even the second column, that mentoring, when we did this evaluation immediately after the program, there were great outcomes for everyone. And as time went on, the only ones that retaining those outcomes were the ones that still had that mentor in their lives. We can't think about mentoring as this one inoculation we give a person and it carries them through the rest of their life. We have to think about it as a vitamin that you keep taking. You keep needing caring adults. Maybe not the same one, but if you have the skills to find more, you can do that. So the idea is there's the young person at the center. They learn how to recruit mentors. Those mentors help them recruit more mentors. And we go into these outcomes that they know the value of it. They have the skills to recruit it. They have the attitudes. That leads to all sorts of great things. I'm going to briefly go over this like in 1 minute, but we have spent the last, and when I say we, I mean Dr. Janice Cooper-Schmidt, my doctoral student, Sarah Schwartz, have spent the last year or more developing training on how to teach young people how to recruit their own mentors, a network of mentors. There's a teacher plan and a student plan. It is now going to be a required course at my university. They sign up for English, and they sign up for this and that, and they sign up for Connected Scholars, which is going to be teaching young people how to recruit caring adults. It's a required course, and I'll bet it's the most valuable course they take, or one of them. The Scholars Workbook, and then these are some of the lessons. How do I become a mentor magnet is one of the last ones, and we give out magnets. But I just want to go back and say that if we're going to ask mentors, teachers, other people, employees to be more intentional about their mentoring, there needs to be rewards for it. We can't just put that on top of their other jobs. So Purdue University in the US is doing something very interesting. They are rewarding professors at the tenure decision on how well they mentored, okay, based on those findings I showed you. So in addition to, when I went up for tenure, it was teaching, service, and research. And my tenure promotion committee evaluated me on those 3 things. Purdue is adding a 4th, okay? The approved document highlights an active role in mentoring, advising, and supporting the academic success of students and postdoctoral as part of the tenure promotion process. That's now part of the promotion process at Purdue. What if it was part of the promotion process in every work setting, in every high school, in every university, in every college? We would have more mentor-rich settings. So the idea is there's caring adults, there's school and workforce readiness. What's going to get them there is mentoring. Mentoring is the connection between the young person and their future. Thank you very much.